Hi guys, welcome to a new video related to Canada immigration. Today I'm going to talk about a very specific scenario for which unfortunately there is not much information available over the internet. So today's topic is about getting married when your Canada immigration application is still in progress. Guys, remember in this video I'm not going to talk about changing spouse status from accompanying to non-accompanying or vice versa. That is a totally separate topic. I'll probably make another video about it sometime. Guys, just so that I'm clear, I'm going to discuss a situation where a person applied for Canada PR and was single at that point of time, but during the course of application the marital status changes and now the person is married. So how to handle this situation? To understand this better, let's have an overview of the different stages involved in the Canada PR process. Just for our easy understanding, I have divided the whole journey into 5 different steps. This is a very high level overview of the whole journey, where the step 1 is to create your express entry profile. Step 2 is receiving the ITA. Obviously, the ITA comes if your CRS was more than the cutoff score. Then step 3 is submitting your EAPR, which is basically submitting all the documents that are required. And then step 4 is getting the passport request from the Canadian Embassy. And then step 5 is finally landing in Canada. Now comes the question, can you get married in this whole process of the Canada PR? Well, the simple answer is yes. Marriage, divorce, childbirth, all these situations are real life situations and they can happen at any point in your life. So there is no restriction on getting married while your application is still in progress. But the real question here is, how does getting married impacts your Canada PR process, which is the main intent of this video. To understand this better, I will try to explain it with 2 different scenarios. So scenario 1 is getting married anytime before step 3, which is basically submitting your EAPR. In other words, getting married anytime before submitting all your documents. So the first step that you see in the table is informing Ircc, which is basically the Canadian immigration. Now, when you inform Ircc about change in your marital status, your application basically goes back into the express entry pool, and the CRS points are now recalculated based off 2 people. So earlier you applied as a single applicant, but now because you got married, the CRS points actually are recalculated. Now because of the change in your marital status, there are 2 people in the application, so the overall CRS score will definitely go down compared to what you had before as a single applicant. So now let's actually take a look at my screen where I have the CRS calculator open. I'm gonna first assume a situation where a person was single, basically not married. So let's try and calculate the CRS for that person. So I'll select never married. Let's assume 26 years of age, has a master's degree, doesn't have any degree in Canada, has taken IELTS, and I'm going to assume the person has top score in all the modules. Hasn't taken any other language test, has 0 work experience in Canada, and has 3 years of more work experience outside of Canada. There's no certificate of qualification, there's no job offer, and there's no nomination as well. So the spouse or the common law partner doesn't have a brother or sister in Canada. We'll select no for this. So if I calculate the score, you will see the total score for this person is 481. Again, this is when the person applied as a single applicant. So now let's just refresh the page. So this time I'm actually going to change the marital status of the person to married, and let's see how it impacts the total CRS. So we will select married here. Select no, where the spouse is not a citizen or permanent resident, and the spouse will come to Canada. So the age remains same as in the previous example, has master's degree. So for all these, we'll select the similar thing what we selected in the first example. Now question 11 is, what is the highest level of education for which your spouse has earned a Canadian degree or has an ECA? So I'm going to assume the spouse has master's degree and doesn't have any work experience in Canada. Now let's assume that the spouse didn't take IELTS at this point, and if I try and calculate the score, you will see the total score is now dropped down to 464 compared to 481 before, right? So that's a huge difference. That is what I was trying to explain earlier.
Now, to boost your CRS score back, the spouse that you added to your application would also need to take IELTS and obviously get the ECA done to have that score added as well in the overall CRS. Now, this step is not at all mandatory. So, if you don't want to have your spouse take the IELTS or get the ECA done, that's totally optional. But as you saw in the example, if in case the spouse is not doing that, it definitely impacts your overall CRS and it will bring it down to what it was before when you applied as a single applicant.
So now let's try and calculate the CRS for the same person who just got married. And this time I'm going to assume that the spouse has taken IELTS exam and will assume some hypothetical bands. Let's see how that impacts the overall CRS. So we are going to select the exact same thing that we selected in our previous example. So this time I'm going to assume that the spouse took IELTS and also scored the highest bands. So now if I calculate the overall score, you will see this now increases to 484 from 481 that was there when the person had applied as a single applicant. This is based off the assumption that the spouse took IELTS and then scored like the maximum bands which are possible. If I go ahead and change it, let's say to 7 each and calculate the score, you will see the score goes down to 482. And then if I further drop it down to, let's say, 6 each, you will see the score goes down to 476, right? So what I'm trying to explain is how your CRS actually gets impacted. It has a major impact if you add the spouse and then the spouse doesn't take IELTS. But if you add the spouse takes IELTS, then your overall CRS can increase or decrease depending upon the cumulative score for the both of you.
Let's talk about scenario 2. Scenario 2 is when the person gets married after step 3 and before step 5. So basically the person gets married after submitting the EAPR but before doing the landing in Canada. So the step 1 here also remains the same. You definitely have to inform IRCC about the change in marital status. Now in this scenario, your application doesn't go back to the express entry pool. So basically your CRS points are not recalculated and your overall CRS also remains the same as it was before when you applied as a single applicant. So in other words, your spouse doesn't have to take IELTS or ECA as it's not impacting the CRS score in any way. Now, the reason why your application doesn't go back into the pool or your CRS score is not recalculated in scenario 2 is because there is a law around it. So if I look at the section under changes to family composition, this clearly defines when your score is not recalculated. So the section that's highlighted, I will read it out for better understanding. It says section A11.2 does not apply when an applicant adds a family member to their application after the EAPR. This section is basically recalculating the score, and as stated, it does not apply when the applicant is added after the EAPR. However, the family member will have to be assessed and the principal applicant must provide IRCC with the additional family information form and pay the applicable fee. So this is the keyword here, guys. Now if I compare the outcomes of scenario 1 and scenario 2, you will see that in scenario 1 there is more hassle. It affects your chances of getting PR as the CRS score is directly impacted and recalculated as well. But in scenario 2, because of the law that I just mentioned, the score is not recalculated, hence the spouse that is being added gets the direct PR provided the other documents are all in place. Now I'm pretty much sure that you guys are interested to know more about scenario 2. So I'll tell you what exactly happens when you inform IRCC about change in your marital status. They will review the case. They will ask you to fill out a relationship questionnaire, provide photos of your spouse, the police clearance certificate for the spouse, along with a few other forms to understand the intent behind doing this. They need to know if the marriage that is going to happen, if it's a genuine marriage, or if it's just a contract that happened between two people because one of them was going to get PR. A lot of people do that. So IRCC will always be checking for the genuineness of the marriage. If they are satisfied with your explanation, then they will ask for medicals. And then once you get the medical request, you're good to go. You can consider that the application is approved for the spouse as well.
Now, a majority of people are not aware about this law or the provision that's there in the Canadian immigration system. So I hope I was able to explain how your CRS score gets impacted when you get married during your application, and it totally depends on what stage are you getting married. So I hope now you guys understand at what stage you should get your spouse added to the application, or basically at what stage you should get married, to ensure that your spouse doesn't have to go through all the hassle and he or she gets a direct PR. Now, as I mentioned before, there's not a lot of information available over the internet. This actually comes from my own experience. Now, I got married after my passport request, which is PPR, came, and I was given 30 days to submit my passport. When I got the passport request, I informed Ircc that I was about to get married in the next few days and requested them to extend the date for the passport submission. They considered my request, and then they sent me a document which had all the instructions on the further steps. So basically, I had to gather the required documents for Richa. I had to get her police clearance certificates and fill out all the other necessary forms which I talked about earlier. Ircc also told me that I don't have to submit my passport because I added spouse to my application, and then they took about 2 months of time to review my application. I'm sure they reviewed it thoroughly. And then after 2 months, they sent another email which had the passport request for the both of us. For people who are sailing in the same boat, one tip would be to provide as many documents as you can. If it's a love marriage, try and prove your relationship by showing old pictures, by showing chat history, if you guys have traveled together, if you have travel tickets. So whatever proof you can gather, try and show that. If it's an arranged marriage and you don't have those sort of proofs available, your pictures would suffice by itself. Again, the idea here is to prove to Ircc that the marriage that has happened is a genuine marriage and it's not a contract marriage per se. Because a lot of people do contract marriages, especially when they know that the other person is about to get a PR. So Ircc definitely wants to avoid the situation, so we need to ensure that we provide as many documents as we can to ensure the genuineness of our relationship or the marriage. So that's it for today's video, guys. I know this was a long one, but as I mentioned in the starting of the video, this is a very niche topic and there is not much information available over the internet. I hope I was able to clarify your questions around getting married when your Canada PR application is still in progress. As always, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask me in the comment section of the video and I will try my best to respond. You can also reach out to us via social media, so our Facebook, Instagram, and the email IDs mentioned in the video description as well. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so and hit the bell icon as well so that you're notified as soon as a video is being uploaded. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.